Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Scaling Service Management in Modern Enterprises. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Grady Gausman, and I'm a product marketer here at Atlassian, working on our Jira Service Management solution. I'm joined today by a very special guest, Julie Mohr from Forrester, to talk more about the state of service management and how organizations can remove barriers to adoption and structure their teams for success. Here's a look at our agenda today. First, Julie is set to provide an overview of the service management landscape, trends in adoption, characteristics of high-performing organizations, backed by some great data and analysis from Julie and the rest of Forrester Research. She'll also dive into some of the challenges enterprise teams face today and how they're navigating those challenges, including the transition towards product-centric thinking and the rise of platform teams to support their feature and value stream counterparts. After that, I'll share a bit about Atlassian's approach to these same themes, how we can keep customers help customers make these transitions to develop new practices and cultures around that product-centric model for service delivery. We'll talk about how organizations can become more agile in their service delivery and increase their autonomy to deliver great products and services while staying aligned to the teams around them. We'll also have time at the end of this webinar for Q&A. Before we jump in, we'd also like to thank the Atlassian solution partners involved in making this webinar possible. For those not familiar, Atlassian solution partners provide deep product knowledge, configuration expertise, customized solutions, and implementation services for Atlassian customers. Many of you were invited to attend this webinar today through their efforts, and we're excited, as always, to collaborate with our partners to help customers see success with our solutions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Julie from Forrester. Julie, take it away.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. There we go. Well, hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today to talk about some really interesting trends that we are seeing in the industry, in particular around scaling of service management. Now, as Grady said, I'm going to talk first a little bit about the background of enterprise service management and some of the challenges that we see organizations in scaling. And then, hopefully some keys to success, some things to take home that you might be able to adopt or at least explore as part of your maturing of your environment. So we're going to start today with the state of enterprise service management. I think one of the most important things is, a couple of years ago, we saw enterprise service management as really this kind of new initiative within organizations to really take the things that we've been doing within service management and driving those into the lines of business. And now we see that this is really, it's very mainstream, and it's a very powerful force behind driving the digital transformation of organizations. And there are lots of things that contribute to that. But I think some of the key parts of it are the ease of use, a unified portal for all employees to go one place to get access to services across the enterprise. It's no longer just the place you go for IT, and then its ability to drive any place, anytime service to employees. So that really puts the business in a position of focusing in on employees and customers first. And when we talk about the expansion of enterprise service management, we really see this into two directions. We have the core IT service management capabilities that are ingrained within these platforms, but with the driving of this into the business units, we see it now integrating into more of the business collaborative spaces. We see asset management as a primary connector between the business and IT. And we also see it now very much being integrated within the developer tool chain. Now, that single portal that we're talking about, that's where all of these different services can come together, right, to serve a variety of different individuals across the organization, including in some environments directly with the customers of the organization. We're able to bring in, automated workflow, internally developed services, but also services that may be provided by third-party providers, through our ecosystem. And the data behind this really indicates that organizations are no longer just viewing these IT service management platforms as an IT tool. This is a data point that came out of our Future Fit survey from last year. And it really indicates an uptick. The yellow bars indicate where we are now using the service portal to represent HR, finance, supply chain, legal services, and some others that were not disclosed. So there is a large emphasis in organizations in really moving and integrating into the business. And, when we do this, we want to think about it using systems thinking. This is not just a platform that we, roll out to a different part of the business. We have to think about the people that it serves. We have to think about, crafting a really great employee experience. We've all been through those miserable portals or self-service sites where you're left to wonder, where do I go? And, you get frustrated with the experience that you have with those technologies. So as we begin to expand this into the business and into other areas across the enterprise, we really have to give that employee experience, an emphasis in the design of those platforms so that we can really, truly create exceptional experiences. And when we talk about this, there's really two ways to drive a better employee experience. I think the first thing is, really creating an experience that wows. So I can find what I want, ease of use, easy to locate. It's got everything that I want. I don't have to go somewhere else within the organization to get what I need. And so the experience of when you're using one of these platforms to perform part of your role, that just is a much better experience. It makes intuitive sense to the employees and it streamlines their experience. But we also have to think of the flip side of this. If we build better products and services, then our customers are not going to necessarily need that support. So we want to apply, better resilience engineering to the products and services itself, but also apply automation wherever we can. And we know that when we create really great and really positive employee experiences, that this is going to have a dramatic impact on the organization. There are productivity gains. That's probably the low-hanging fruit, right? We want you to stop looking around the organization for the information that you need to do your job. And we want to bring you into one consolidated place in order to get those services. That's going to improve productivity. But our studies have shown that, it's not just the productivity gains, it's people like going to work, so they're not calling out sick as often. It leads to higher employee satisfaction. And of course, we know when we have happy employees, we're probably going to impact customer satisfaction. But it also ties back to profitability. So, providing a really great experience is something worth doing right because it can have a dramatic impact on the success of the business. And there are lots of different technologies across the enterprise that really can help to create a better employee experience. And of course, we want those all working collectively together to provide that experience. No one platform on its own can deliver that, but when you look at the landscape of products and services that you may be using, you want to make sure that you're applying that systems engineering, that you're creating an experience that translates to value to the employee, but is consistent in its delivery across all the different channels and different products that you may be using. And when I think about this, I think about support and what it's always looked like for decades, right? It was always, you get into the queue, right? The faster you get into the queue, the faster you're going to get out of the queue. And when you have something that's really important, you try to avoid it. You go around it, right? And that's because queuing is not really a great fun thing for humans to do. We don't really like having to wait around. But, when we start looking at a technology ecosystem, we can, instead of focusing on these queues of work, instead focus on delivering an experience that streamlines that. The least amount of time that you spend in a queue, the better for you as an employee. It really addresses that productivity perspective. But overall, as an organization, we're working smarter. We're not working harder. And we don't have a lot of work waiting in a queue, or we call it WIP, or work in progress. We're better able to manage the work that does come in because we are applying those two paths to getting to a better employee experience. Now, service mapping has really advanced. It used to be, we talked about the CMDB and how important it was, and not many organizations were successfully engaged with a CMDB. What we're finding now is that the technology has evolved. And of course, if we're applying automation to that, we're able to now successfully not only capture through agent and agentless discovery of our assets across our infrastructure, we're actually able to keep that information up to date. And that includes mapping of the dependencies, and those dependencies to services. And I think another really important part of the expansion of this is that it's not just IT assets that organizations are tracking within a CMDB. And our research, again, it proves this, right? That high-performing organizations have really got a good working CMDB. It's a trusted source of truth, especially when we're working to restore a service or make improvements to a service. We have reliable information to make those decisions, and that way we're managing the services more effectively. And as I said, assets are emerging across the organization, and we see this in the way that it's being used within enterprise service management. We have, case studies where organizations are tracking voter registration, right? These are the types of assets that can now be captured within a CMDB, especially because it's, a lot of the discovery and upkeep of the information is automated. We're able to capture more information about assets across the enterprise. And this is not just important to us to manage our delivery of operations within IT, but we also need to think about business operations. What is at the core that the business is doing? What are the assets that they're using, and applying the same methodologies that we have for a long time within IT service management to those business assets, right? Entering them in, understanding a baseline configuration, understanding if it's under maintenance. These are very valuable points that help us manage assets across the enterprise. Now, the automation is really, we've seen a significant amount of work being made in automation. And I think the most important thing to think about here is that automation should really be applied where it makes the most sense. Pick your low-hanging fruit, right? The most repetitive tasks that you're doing all the time are great candidates for applying that automation. Anything from events, incidents, problems, known errors, things where there have been patterns in the past that we can clearly define a corrective action or a workflow that needs to spin based upon a certain set of criteria that have been discovered. And because of those advancements, and especially as we continue to advance with AI and machine learning, automation is only going to become more successful and can be applied in more areas. And we've traditionally thought about applying it within IT service management. I think there are lots of opportunities for us to help with automation on the business side. It's not just about putting a workflow engine into the hands to track work. It's also, how can we help the business to optimize that and apply automation where necessary? And it really changes the way our organization functions. I mean, I can remember for decades, we have had this like 3 or 4 tiered structure. Tier 0 being self-service, maybe a limited amount of effectiveness. Tier 1 took everything else in and figured out where it needed to go. And then we would escalate to different parts of the organization for subject matter expertise. self-service is working in ways that it has not in the past. And I have to throw in the generative AI into this conversation, but we can probably expect there'll be some pretty significant advancements there in the future. So as self-service grows and becomes a really effective level 0, that means we're taking in less through level 1. If we're applying automation and eliminating as much as possible of what comes into level 1, now we have a completely different makeup of the way that the organization has to work, because we've generally put generalists on level 1 to take a large volume of calls, kind of funnel them into the organization, resolve as much as they could. So it changes the dynamics of what level 1 looks like. And it also changes what operations looks like. It used to be that operations was really about, I would say, 3/4 of the budget for most organizations, and application development was probably represented a quarter. But now we see where we're applying automation. It's everything from infrastructure as code, product teams, now they own it and they run it. We have the cloud platforms, we have IT platform automation, and we see that operations is really shrinking in its ecosystem, its complete ecosystem, which should provide us some productivity gains in order to help serve the business and apply a lot of what we've learned over the last couple decades in IT service management to enterprise service management and support of the lines of business. Now, there's a cautionary tale here. While we know that automation is, a tremendous thing to help drive productivity in organizations and can create really great employee experiences, when we look at the changing dynamics of what happens within an organization, one of the things that we have to be aware of is it changes the dynamic of work. Not just our operating model, but the type of work that we are passing through that operating model. And what that means is that it's going to be mostly stuff we haven't seen before, because if we have seen it and we're applying automation effectively, then we're probably reducing the volume related to a particular type of thing that's coming into the organization. So it means that the work is new. We need stronger skill sets. It might take us much longer to solve things, because now we're talking about incidents or problems that we haven't seen before, likely things that require more significant investment in time to discover root cause. And so it really changes the skill sets that we need in addition to that operating model. All right, so let's now talk about some of the challenges of scaling service management. And I think it's kind of interesting, when we look at the landscape of change, we have gone through just a crazy amount of new ideas and, frameworks and methodologies and AI and machine learning and the shift to agile development. There have just been so many things that have happened in our industry. It often leads us with this, but where do we start? Where is the best opportunity for us to create value? And one of the challenges is that it's just a really complex ecosystem, right? So finding that pinpoint place to start can be very difficult, mostly because there's a lot of things that are moving, but also we may not have the best analytics that helps us to understand where our greatest points of weakness are so that we can apply our efforts in a way that's going to make it most successfully. And a lot of organizations really struggle with delivery of internal services, especially when we compare our internal delivery with a lot of the most common, services that we get externally. If you're used to getting really good service, depending on, where you host your email, where you get your cable, where you watch TV, we all have service providers that we work with on an ongoing basis. So when our employees compare the delivery of internal services to those that they get external to the organization, that gap becomes even bigger. And so we have to focus on removing those barriers. We have to look at a couple things. I think one of the most important things is that as these platforms expand across the organization, we are very kind of stuck in our old ways of thinking, meaning that this is an IT tool to serve an IT need. When we start pushing things into the business and we're directly connecting to, let's say, release automation from a developer perspective, we need to build this platform in a way that works for all of those different end users, right? I don't want to push to the business. You have to call this an incident. You have to call this a problem, or this is a request. When they're talking about work orders or issues, right? So we have to, first of all, understand each other's environment. And that hasn't been easy for us to do. DevOps was supposed to help solve that. And it's moved us in one direction, probably in a good place, but it hasn't solved that problem. So we have to take in the different perspectives. The second thing is we have held on to, for a very long time, a command and control structure. When it's proven that some amount of matrix organization, where you may have a line manager that you report to, but you're working directly with another group where they need your skill sets to be successful. And the last part about this is our funding models. We have traditionally been on annual funding models where each year you have to compete to get money, when some of these core capabilities really are essential to business operations and should have, persistent funding across the organization. Now, a couple of the things that go into the challenges, and I think, the old paradigm of the service model, right? The first come, first serve, the who screams the loudest is the person that gets the services. These are things that are of a past view of our shared services organization, and we really have to move to something more value add. And we see this pain point, especially as developers, especially during the time when we were losing a lot of really good talent. As they were leaving, they were pointing out the difficulties that they were having with operational teams, right? This is where our operational processes were so rigid that they couldn't make room for the more agile development processes that really required a much more pace of velocity. So these operating models are based upon, the way of thinking from the past. We have outdated org structures. We have underinvested capabilities that are essential for us to move forward. And in many cases, highly over-engineered processes that are governing the work that we do that gets in the way of organizations being successful. And again, here I have another data point around, the challenges that we see, especially from an Agile DevOps perspective. Security, risk, governance, those are always going to be at the top of things that we have to be worried about from a development perspective. But the ones that I think are important are difficulties in executing enterprise-wide change. So whether that's because of the complexity of the environment or all the barriers that we put in place and all the delay gates that we put in place, it is a major factor in an organization's ability to be agile. There's also project management, where we're so focused on applying people. Projects are okay in certain realms. They're required as you're going through significant change where there's a lot of different moving parts. A project plan is great, but when we're rolling out software and we're doing so on a much more consistent basis, project planning just doesn't work within that very agile way of working. We don't want large amounts of change being packaged into a project. We want short iterations. And so that mindset within organizations about running things through project management with project managers and focused on cost. These are things that derail a lot of the transformation of organizations because they really do require us thinking about transformation in a different way. Which brings me to the next topic that I want to talk about, which is this transformation from projects to products. Now, this is a major trend that we are seeing, not just in our clients coming and asking us about, how they can engage in making this transformation. It's also a very hot topic in the industry. There have been a lot of very public organizations that have, talked about their transformation and the value that can create, especially as it relates to agility. And it's more than just a simple transformation. This is a very complex thing that does require you to think about some of those norms that we've been talking about in the prior part of this presentation. You got to be willing to move on from some of those old ways of thinking and looking at stuff in a new way, and be willing to try and experiment and fail fast, in order to learn and continue to move forward. Now, this is a very interesting data point here. This is from a recent survey in 2022 as well, around organizations and how much of their work is actually being done. Notice that it's kind of an even balance between the functional structure, project, and product. So if you're, looking at ways in which you want to evolve your maturity, you can see just from this data how organizations are kind of moving and shifting some of their work into that product structure where it absolutely makes sense. Now, as it relates to breaking down those barriers, I think it's really, really important to understand that when we start working with different groups, we have decades-long cultural, terminology, and practices that are embedded in the way that we have been doing work. And when we try to cross over and we try to be more supportive of a new area within the enterprise, we can't just come in, and it's our way or the highway. We have to get to know the culture, we have to understand the terminology, and we have to understand the practices, because it's not pushing IT service management and saying, you have to do it this way. The platforms have the ability to adapt and to create workflows that make the most sense to the teams in which we're expanding into. And that's particularly important as we start embracing this product-centric operating model. And some of the differences in the way that we view things, right? I'll just pick a couple of these. For a product-centric organization, right? It isn't around specialist skills. We definitely need subject matter experts, but it's more about how can we get an efficient use of the skills that we're developing within this functional group to help out with, a different part of the organization. We want faster delivery with feedback cycles. We don't want these long implementations where we don't really know if we get there until the end of the project. We want incremental improvements where we're adjusting. I was just on a call the other day where I was cautioning, don't over-engineer this at the beginning. Start small. Try just one part of that massive project that you've defined and see if it works. If what you're thinking and what you're doing at the beginning is working, then as you progress and move out more and more change, you're more likely to get the outcomes that you're looking for. Stop waiting to get an outcome, 18 months down the road. You want to see incremental improvements into the environment. And if you're not getting those, figure out earlier why you're not getting the benefits that you're hoping to get. Of course, autonomy is a really important part of this. We want people to have the resources as well as the right people collectively working together in order to move more quickly through transition. Now, there are a lot of drivers around the product centricity. Faster time to market is probably the one that we hear the most about. For those of you that have I have met in the past, you know how important knowledge management is to me. I think this is another very important driver of product centricity. It's improved responsiveness to change. We cannot, keep putting things into long queues and really robust mechanisms for approval. We have to be able to roll things out and transition quickly enough for that business. It's that employee experience that we talked about earlier, creating a better employee experience, outcome-oriented, focused on customers, customer centricity. So there are lots of different drivers here, but ultimately, product or service, whether you want to call it product or service, it's really about how we manage and collaborate across the organization. Now, a subset of product teams would be a platform team. And this is probably the most important to this particular group of individuals who would be attending this webinar, is the platform teams are really about applying product mindset to a particular part of the infrastructure within an IT organization. And essentially what we want to do is manage that like a product, understanding who are our customers, what are their needs, prioritizing improvements to that platform such that it supports the business and the business outcomes. So that platform, applying product within an IT organization to a platform structure can really create a big difference. It has the ability to reduce cognitive load, moving from feature and value stream focused teams, more detailed knowledge flow, better monitoring. We're really looking at this as a system as a whole and thinking about those outcomes that it's supposed to be delivering. We've talked about this for a long time in IT service management, about value delivery and about outcome, thinking about business outcomes. The difficulty is we've always done it from a process-centric perspective, and the processes were kind of low in that entire delivery of outcomes. So it was very hard for us to say this process is delivering this business outcome. When you're running something like a platform team, you are working holistically towards customer centricity, towards value. You don't do anything that isn't immediately coming from, the outcome that you want to produce. And there are certain opportunity areas. We've seen different organizations bring in the platform team into a variety of different areas, including storage, mainframe, edge, endpoint management, incident or change, knowledge management, SRE sometimes. So it is definitely something that organizations are adopting. I highly recommend that as you go forward with something like a platform team, that you follow that advice of start small. You don't want to go out and completely re-engineer your organization and, not understand what it takes to make a platform team successful. If you start with just one platform team, find out what works, what doesn't work, how you get your how you understand their perspective, how you bring people together, building out that collaboration, leveraging the technologies that you can to help make your team successful. Start small, learn as you go, and apply platform teams where it makes the most sense. Doesn't mean that everybody needs to have a functional line manager and be part of a platform team. So some keys to success here. I believe this about anything. We have these tremendous pressures within IT to modernize. We've done a good job within IT. Now there's this big pressure to modernize the business. And we end up making a lot of decisions that don't necessarily translate to success. And in some cases, actually have unintended effects that are quite negative for the organization. So I call this the swinging pendulum. We go from these extremes. I can remember we were highly decentralized in support. We moved to a centralized version. We got all the cost savings and everything that we wanted, but then we really didn't know our customers very well, and they would complain all the time about the quality of the service. We've gone from waterfall all the way over to Agile. Agile is great. It doesn't always apply to every development scenario. You need to use it where it makes sense. So as you are, moving from command and control to more autonomous teams, try not to swing, really far in the other direction, but try to take a really good approach to it where you're learning as you go. You're trying to keep away from the extremes and create a balance within your organization. Project management is still going to be needed. It can't be used. You can't move to products for everything. There are some major, transitions that you're going to need project management for, but where it makes sense, apply products. So just be aware of the extremes. Again, experiment, fail fast, learn. To me, this is an exciting opportunity for people to, we're kind of at that edge of the ITIL methodology, and we're looking for the next best thing for us to continue that journey of maturation of our organizations. So we see the boundaries that we've had for decades between IT and the business and IT and development are so blurred that it's a ripe opportunity for us to look at better collaboration, ways in which we connect across the organization to deliver services and products in new ways that we have never been able to do before, because we're breaking down those barriers. And just so you know, really transforming an infrastructure team into a platform team is not an easy thing to do. There are a couple things that you should really be aware of. The first is that people management, if you put a product team together and you have all of these new things that they're focused on, if you add people management to that, you're going to create what we call an anti-pattern, which means it's going to be very difficult for that product team to get done what it needs to get done. Line management should really go back to that functional manager of a team. They know what skills they need. They know how many people they need, right? They're better able to manage it from a people management perspective, allowing the product team the capacity, as well as the leadership of that product team, the capacity to do what they're supposed to be doing, which is to really focus on that product and its design and its delivery of those outcomes. You just don't want to overwhelm a team that's newly formed with a lot of extra overhead that will get in the way of them making the right decisions on how to really deliver that product. And on that note, it's another really important thing to think about the skill sets. Product management is not a skill set that most IT people have. It is something that you need to develop. It's something that they'll need training for, because understanding how to manage a product end to end and all of the constituent parts of that is a very important skill set. Our research proves this, that you absolutely need for that product team or that platform team to be successful. Another really important part, and this could be a low-hanging fruit, is really around, creating a unified funnel. I'm a subject matter expert, but I help in so many variety of different ways. And all those different groups that I work with and the different teams that I work with, they all have some unit of work that I am involved in. And one of the benefits of moving to a product team is this unified funnel, that no matter where my expertise is used, whether I'm working on something related to incident management or I'm helping out over here with something related to a product team, I have the ability to bring my work into one platform such that I know exactly what I'm working on. I know how to prioritize that work, and that allows me to get my work done more effectively. Now, this graphic, and I only have a couple more slides here that I want to get through, but this graphic really dictates where we're going with this. It kind of shows you the core IT service management capabilities and how there are certain parts of the business that can leverage parts of an IT service management platform to really drive that automation and that maturity that we need on the business side. And then there are certain parts of the platform that can connect with, the development teams and engineering. And we have to understand that it's not just workflow automation. There are a lot of different things that can make that connection that can help to really unify the organization. As you do that, there are going to be a lot of other tools that are being used in different parts of the organization. And so one of your kind of ways in which you're looking at this transformation, part of the cost savings is looking for those areas that have been underserved by a platform that exists in the environment, and how you can bring a new platform in from an IT service management perspective and give them so much more than they've had with another technology. So tool rationalization is a very important part of applying enterprise service management across the organization. Now, just a couple more things. Don't forget the customer. Everything that we should be doing should focus on how we're going to deliver greater value to the business, to the lines of business, and to our customers. We want to make changes that help transform, but we also don't want to lose sight of the reason why we're here in the first place, which is to really deliver great services to our customers. Don't be afraid to try new things. I think platform teams are a great idea. I think some experimentation here is a good idea. This is a new idea that is transforming every day. We're getting a lot of really great information from people about what works and what doesn't, but it's highly applicable to specific organizations. So we're still analyzing the data and coming up with generalized approaches, but high-performing organizations are definitely of the mindset that they're going to try things, they'll fail fast, and then they'll continuously improve. And don't forget your people. This is a journey, and you need the right people engaged, you need the right skill sets engaged, and you need the entire organization really focused on continual improvement. It needs to be a part of the culture. It needs to be the way that we look at things, right? It's not just about what I think is right. We need to engage all those stakeholders, get all those different perspectives. We need to understand what their needs are, what their concerns are, the risks. We really want this as business as usual. Always be looking to continuously improve. And please celebrate your success. Your small wins could really turn into big things in the future, but really celebrate as you go along this journey, as you're creating those successes. And again, remember, fast feedback loops and a no blame culture. So that's it for me. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Grady.
Thank you so much, Julie. Some really great insights there into this market, both on the data side, what you're seeing through the research, as well as best practices for attendees here to consider as they look at implementing some of this into their own enterprises. Before we turn to some questions here at the end, I want to take a moment to give Julie a little bit of a break and also talk about how Atlassian is thinking through some of these same themes. Earlier in this session, Julie mentioned some of the drivers of product-centric service delivery, and many of these ring really true on the customer side with conversations that we're having here every day. Time to market certainly is one we hear a lot. The ability to build and support a new product or service is a huge priority for organizations of all sizes, but we do see challenges in that time to market and for the deployment of service management solutions themselves. It makes it really hard to ship new things, to create new experiences when standing up those service management platforms themselves takes forever. It consumes resources in their own way. New things involve change, which inherently introduces risk into existing products and services. Teams need to have visibility into the history, into dependencies, all these different pieces of context to make better decisions regarding changes. And that includes automation in parts of that process too. And when something does happen, a central service goes down, a product isn't working, teams need the ability to quickly collaborate on that outage and to bring the right cross-functional stakeholders from those teams like development and operations and support into the same room to find a resolution, because that ultimately affects the experience for internal or external customers alike. As Julie mentioned, knowledge underpins all parts of that service delivery. And if you have access to Forrester Research, I highly encourage you to go and read some of her recent research on knowledge management. It really is this foundational aspect for employee self-service support, to context around incidents. It's ensuring that information makes its way out of these silos and the individual heads of employees into a place where it can be stored and updated and improved. It's truly fundamental for organizations of all sizes. And ultimately, this whole product-centric team approach starts and ends with employee experience. If you're shipping a new product or service, it's because there's a need out there from a customer. And so really focusing on what that customer needs, what that outcome looks like, what does success look like, and building backwards from that so that you have great experiences for internal employees that results in great experiences for the external customers that you serve, as Julie's research mentioned earlier. And so really those challenges for and drivers of product-centric service delivery are really what form our approach in this space as well. We want to make sure that when it comes to time to value, that we focus on the ability for customers to get started quickly. We want teams that are using solutions from Atlassian and Jira Service Management specifically to be able to build and launch new experiences. And that means that underlying platform those experiences are built on has to be intuitive and offer fast time to value. Connecting development and operations is the biggest reason why customers are seeking out Jira Service Management. Most organizations are already using Jira software, seeing benefits from that agile methodology, and integrating Jira Service Management into that process provides unparalleled visibility between those two teams. So folks have rich contextual information at their fingertips to move fast and make better decisions, and again, ultimately ship faster and reduce the risk that accompanies some of those changes. And then finally, as Julie has mentioned throughout, service management isn't just for IT teams anymore. It's for teams all across the business, from HR to facilities, legal, marketing. They're realizing the benefits of managing requests, of capturing knowledge in the same way that the IT has fundamentally done for years. So empowering each of these teams to take ownership of those experiences has a dramatic impact on the delivery of those products and services. Regardless of the team or type of work, we strive to make it easy to extend those practices to other teams that are raising their hands and saying, I'd like to be part of this culture, to be part of this motion as well. One Atlassian customer who's seen this transformation happen in their own organization is AppDynamics. This company has grown dramatically over the years, and originally had very siloed autonomous departments in their early days. But as they approached 2,000 people across their organization, they realized they had poor visibility and alignment into what others were working on or decisions that were being made across the organization. And pre-existing processes and systems from the earlier days needed to be updated to keep pace with the business goals and the pace of change that's present in today's world. Their culture was also developer dominated, and I'm sure that's something that a lot of Atlassian customers can relate to. But as they grew, they needed to include other teams in the business, including those non-technical teams, and continue to scale. And this was in order from the top down, right? This was something that the executives within that organization realized. How do we accelerate our business by focusing on our own experiences? How do we break down these barriers between teams? Another thing that really resonated for me in Julie's presentation was that pendulum, right? And finding that balance in between one side versus the other. And AppDynamics found that perfect middle through that combination of Jira software and Jira Service Management. They're able to maintain that and move towards that DevOps culture of moving quickly and solving problems, fostering that transparency, but still having processes in place where needed to help standardize those operations there as they grew. And really that helped them be successful and meet those demands, be more agile when it came to adapting to change and continuing to grow their business, unifying those teams that were originally those startups and silos in different parts of their organization, unifying them together. To summarize here, we believe that those traditional approaches to service delivery and ways of working will continue to evolve to meet expectations in a digital world, right? Service owners inside and outside of IT will recognize the value of those product-centric approaches that we've talked about, drawing on Agile and DevOps philosophies and practices, while also using frameworks that have worked to provide alignment there. Our vision is that we provide these companies with a platform that connects development, connects IT operations, connects business teams together so that work flows from initial input and idea to concept and design to building to launching to operating and supporting all of those different service experiences and tightening that feedback loop and learning loops, just like a product lifecycle does too. So we feel that this is accomplished through autonomy with alignment. And you heard Julie earlier talk a little bit about those themes of autonomy, but we want teams to be empowered to do their best work on the support and on the operations side, whatever way they see fit. Those folks are experts in their own corner of the business. So how do we give them the tools to succeed and then get out of their way? But autonomy without alignment is simply chaos, right? There has to be a balance there. So including the right amount of process and automation brings the alignment to those groups and keeps everybody on track. Pulling in that right direction there without compromising or feeling like there's too much process or there's other things in the way there. So autonomy with alignment really is the way that we feel a successful service experience can be expanded to a lot of these other teams. Okay, with a couple minutes remaining here, we want to take a few questions, expanding on some of the topics that Julie touched on earlier. Julie, are you ready? Rested?
Yeah.
Okay, great. The first question we had goes back to some of the platform thinking. And the question really is, can smaller organizations benefit from that platform team thinking, or is that strictly reserved for larger organizations with more resources, excuse me? How might small to mid-sized organizations begin to think about that platform concept?
That's a really good question, because you almost are, you think that a really large organization is the only way to apply product teams. But, I look at two things that are most important. One is outcome oriented and customer oriented. And, I don't know of any organization of any size that can't create a lot of value by coming together with those two things in mind. That would be my recommendation is, you don't have to necessarily call it a platform team or, put together this new elaborate structure. But a lot of the concepts that we're talking about here are very applicable. Trying to create a way to work autonomously, starting to focus on less rigor around command and control. These are all concepts that can be embraced in small ways. They don't have to be major organizational change, but can actually help even smaller organizations to make some really important transition. And remember, the key is really that experimentation. Try something, learn from it, but stay focused on that as your North Star is really that customer centricity and business outcomes.
Great. I think that's great advice, focusing on a couple early tests or experiments and seeing how those go in some of those priority areas. That's great advice. A second question that came through: what are the most common tool rationalizations you're seeing in some of your research or travels?
That's an interesting one because while we do see platforms expanding into the enterprise in a much broader fashion, there are really two critical places, at least from my perspective of the research that I've done and the companies that I've talked to. One is the integration, especially related to change management, about this very regulated governance process that has a lot of rigor, butting up against an automated release orchestration type process coming out of the development teams. There is a lot of value in making or focusing on the concepts that we talked about in this particular presentation in order to eliminate that as being a barrier. It tends to be a really tough place to get work done, but it's probably one of your greatest opportunities to really make a difference. And so as you're, making that connection, there are going to be a lot of different tools that are out there that you can look at as far as a rationalization is perspective. But remember, it comes down to understanding perspectives and their environment. I think another place that we've seen a tremendous amount of overlap, and this is a new emerging area, is really around work collaboration management. That asset management layer is really important because when we think about applying it in a business operations perspective, let's say I'm a marketing team and I've created a presentation and I've translated it into Spanish for use in Mexico, right? Both of those assets are important, but they're the same asset, but they're in two different versions. Being able to track that and not, okay, now we've got another one for Spain, we're going to translate it again. This is the work that we get done. These are digital assets that are probably just as valuable to the organization as a server. So being able to track things within business processes that are incredibly important, that's another really important crossover. It's actually probably an underserved area in the business. So there may not be a whole lot of tool rationalization, but there is an opportunity there that if you can convince them, look, we have analytics, we have asset management, we have a single portal, you may be able to get rid of, some of the legacy systems that are currently underserving those areas of the business. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think it does. It certainly resonates with some of us here in hearing some of the case studies and customer stories for how folks are storing different things in assets or in these databases. Traditional assets like servers or laptops, but also to content, to facilities, to tracking items in a supply chain. It's really an incredible number of use cases. We're surprised every day at how organizations are making it work based on their use cases. All right, final question I have for you. This one references the U-curve of that automation paradox that you shared earlier. Are there strategies to address the more challenging work that's left over, or kind of once you get further along in that curve, what changes, or what's your strategy there towards the end of that curve?
This is a perfect question, Grady, because when I look at automation and all the possibilities and all the wonderful things that we can do with technology, the bottom line is technology doesn't transform companies, people do. And when, really good managers know that by managing skill sets for today, they're behind the curve. And they're always looking to keep their people ahead of the technology. Just as an example, right? Generative AI is you can't do anything these days without tripping on something related to generative AI. I mean, I can read the writing on the wall, so can everybody else. It's important to develop skill sets, to be early in the adoption curve. It doesn't mean you're going to roll out a complete new offering, but you do need to experiment. You need to try things. You need to understand the new technology so that you can be prepared to adopt it. So I think when we look at that automation paradox, it applies in so many different areas of our organization, because we're transforming not with just automation, but with new technologies that we haven't seen before. Focus on your people. Make sure they have the skill sets for what's coming next. That means as soon as you know about it, start seeking the information, the collaboration, talking to other people that are trying things. Pay attention to LinkedIn when you see, people talking about things that they're doing with this new technology. Be an explorer. Always be on the leading edge from a knowledge perspective, and don't wait.
Great advice to close us on out here. Thank you so much. That's about all the time we have today. Julie, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate the insight and the research that you've shared in this space, and hope that many attendees who joined us here have good takeaways for them as they return back to their own organization. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Take care, everyone.